Scene 1408. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
As Dodge and Linda journeyed back to their home, they tuned into a radio broadcast that delivered grim tidings. Humanity's last-ditch effort to thwart the colossal asteroid named Matilda had fallen short. Tragically, Matilda was on a collision course with Earth, and the countdown stood at a mere 3 weeks. Dodge, trying to maintain his composure, simply pointed out that they had missed their exit. Linda, on the other hand, shot him a disbelieving glance before making a silent exit, bidding him farewell. With just 21 days until the asteroid's imminent impact, Dodge's life continued with remarkable normalcy. The peculiar ways people react to impending tragedy became apparent. Some individuals even began to offer their services as professional terminators for those unwilling to await the world's end. Amid his routine visit to the gym, Dodge caught wind of a news flash. Cell services were defunct and power and water supplies were on the brink of shutting down. Yet, undeterred, Dodge persisted in his daily commute to work, despite traffic that had grown even more congested than usual. At the workplace, Dodge, an insurance salesman, found himself in a meeting where upper management executive positions were being given away with little fanfare. His colleagues and he all displayed various reactions, but a pervasive sense of despair weighed heavily on the atmosphere. Upon returning to his apartment complex, Dodge was greeted by an empty mailbox. Upon reaching his unit, the sound of a vacuum cleaner hummed from within. Dodge hastily assumed it was Linda, but soon discovered it was their weekly cleaner, Elsa. She welcomed him with a warm smile, prompting him to invite her to stay and watch TV. However, she gracefully declined his offer. In light of the world's current state, Dodge informed Elsa that she need not return the following week, a decision that didn't sit well with her. Uncertain whether Elsa was oblivious to the impending asteroid or simply choosing to ignore it, Dodge swiftly rescinded his decision, reassuring her that she would indeed be back the next week. Elsa departed, promising her return. Left to his own devices, Dodge kept his eyes glued to more updates, learning that airlines had ceased operation and the last flight had taken off. The following day, he ventured to work, sporting conspicuous spider bites on his face. A harrowing incident unfolded as a man leapt to his death and landed on Dodge's car, leaving him utterly shaken. Now, with just 14 days remaining, Dodge attended a party hosted by his friends, Warren and Diane. As Dodge crossed the threshold, Diane wasted no time in commenting on Linda, remarking how she had never seemed truly content with him. It was a revelation that had eluded Dodge all along. Being single now, Diane had grand plans to set him up with her friend, an idea he wasn't particularly keen on. In contrast, Warren offered him an exceptionally exclusive cigar, which he graciously accepted. Diane insisted that Dodge needed to meet someone or else he'd face a lonely demise, but Warren had a different perspective, asserting that Dodge wasn't destined to die alone because he'd share his fate with the rest of the world. Diane went ahead and introduced him to Karen, who had dressed herself to the nines, seizing the opportunity to wear her unworn clothes. Over dinner, the group openly discussed their plans for the precious days ahead, and Karen candidly expressed her growing fondness for Dodge. As the night unfolded, the party began to unravel, with even Warren encouraging the kids to partake in alcohol. On the other hand, Karen persistently pursued Dodge, who remained aloof to her advances. Instead, he engaged in conversation with another friend, Roesh, who regaled him with tales of his numerous escapades with various women since the Doomsday announcement. Roesh even tried to convince Dodge to join him and Karen for some fun, but Dodge wasn't inclined in that direction. As the night wore on, Dodge found refuge in the bathroom, deciding to distance himself from his friends who were now experimenting with hard drugs. In an unexpected turn of events, Diane entered the bathroom to check on Dodge. To his astonishment, she initiated a kiss, causing him to swiftly push her away, reminding her of her marital commitment to his friend. Diane's perspective sharply contrasted with Dodge's as she asserted that nobody belonged to anyone anymore. Unable to digest this turn of events, Dodge decided to leave the party early and reflect on his past life. He gazed at a photograph of himself and his high school sweetheart, Olivia, and began to play the harmonica. Suddenly, he noticed a woman in tears by the fire escape. Dodge approached her, and she immediately broke down in his arms, despite being a complete stranger. The woman, Penny, turned out to be Dodge's downstairs neighbor. Besides recently parting ways with her boyfriend, she had also missed her flight and was stranded far from home. Dodge invited Penny inside, and they introduced themselves. During their conversation, Penny took a sip of Dodge's cough syrup mixed with vodka, offering him some weed, though he declined. She mentioned that the substances helped her cope with her hypersomnia, allowing her to sleep through the impending apocalypse. That night, Penny dozed off on Dodge's couch, unaffected by the loud television or Elsa's vacuuming. Dodge even tried to rouse her by pinching her nose, but she remained unresponsive. A while later, Penny finally woke up, and Dodge escorted her back to her apartment. At Penny's door, she handed him a collection of letters that had mistakenly been delivered to her mailbox over the years, revealing that she had held onto them for quite some time. Curious about Linda, Penny assumed she was Dodge's roommate, recalling that she seemed content with her boyfriend and would bring a man over to their apartment without Dodge's knowledge. The revelation incited Dodge's anger, leading him to return to his apartment and rid it of Linda's belongings. Overwhelmed by his emotions, he retreated to a park with a bottle of window cleaner in an attempt to end his life. To his surprise, he awoke the next day, only to find himself tethered to an abandoned dog with a note that simply read, "Sorry." Returning to his apartment, Dodge witnessed chaos erupting in the streets but opted to ignore it. As he watched the news reporting a massive riot, he perused the lost mail that Penny had returned to him, discovering a confession letter from Olivia dated months ago. Suddenly, a brick came crashing through his window from the riot outside. He tried to exit through the front door but heard a commotion in the hallway, leading him to escape through the fire escape. He took Sorry, the dog, with him and descended to Penny's apartment. Inside, he encountered Owen, Penny's ex-boyfriend, who immediately assumed that Dodge was involved with Penny. Annoyed, Dodge brushed Owen aside and roused Penny, warning her about the ongoing riots. However, Owen attempted to thwart Dodge's efforts. Dodge urged them to leave quickly, but Penny insisted on taking a few of her music records with her. Penny offered to drive as they sought to escape the turmoil, but locating her car proved challenging. Gunshots rang out, prompting Owen to use Penny as a shield to protect himself. When they finally reached her vehicle, Penny struggled to maneuver out of a parallel parking space. Owen, meanwhile, berated her for her parking skills. Dodge, eager to depart, informed Penny that he knew someone with a plane who could help them escape. He offered to take her to her family if she could get him out of the current predicament. Penny, making a reckless decision, drove away, leaving Owen behind. The next day, they ran out of gas and found themselves walking along the road. The strain of their situation led to tensions and arguments. Dodge accused Penny of ruining his life, holding her responsible for not delivering Olivia's letter in time. Overwhelmed by guilt, Penny promised to assist him in finding his lost love. She hailed a passing vehicle and requested a lift to Somerset from the driver, Glenn, who kindly agreed. On their journey, Penny coaxed Glenn into sharing his life story, and he confessed that he had planned to end his own life after learning of the impending apocalypse. In their ongoing conversation, Glenn admitted that ending his life wouldn't guarantee him a place in heaven. Dodge, however, grew suspicious when he noticed shovels in the back of Glenn's truck. Soon after, Glenn stopped to take a break and invited Dodge to join him, an offer that Dodge declined. While Penny took sorry for a walk, Glenn approached Dodge and mistakenly believed he was the hitman he had hired. Dodge was initially perplexed, but managed to clear up the misunderstanding. Sadly, their peace was short-lived as the genuine assassin shot Glenn in the neck and fled the scene. When Penny returned, they buried Glenn using the shovels they had found in his truck. They decided to utilize Glenn's vehicle, but since they had accidentally buried the keys with him, they had to exhume his body to retrieve them. Continuing their journey in Glenn's truck, Dodge and Penny began to bond and get to know each other better. They stumbled upon a restaurant called Frenzies and were greeted by Darcy and Katie, the exceptionally friendly servers. While placing their order, Penny lied and told the staff it was Dodge's birthday, which resulted in a small surprise and a couple of kisses. However, when things started getting chaotic, they hurriedly exited the restaurant. Afterwards, Dodge and Penny found themselves sharing an intimate moment in the truck. Dodge, however, began to feel uneasy about their age difference, fearing that he might appear to be taking advantage of Penny. He offered an apology, but Penny brushed it off, assuring him that it was inevitable. As they resumed their journey, a police officer pulled them over for speeding. At the same time, they learned that Glenn's vehicle had a broken taillight and an expired license plate. In the midst of a world gripped by turmoil, Penny attempted to plead with the unyielding officer, Wally, in a bid to secure their release, but her efforts were in vain. As a result, they found themselves incarcerated in separate cells. Penny, overwhelmed with guilt, believed she had ruined not only her life, but also Dodge's. From behind the bars, Dodge tried to console her and began sharing stories from his own life to lift her spirits. After a while, one of the other police officers intervened, expressing apologies for Wally's behavior. He also informed them that their truck had been impounded and offered them a ride. However, their desired destination was too far, so Penny asked to be taken to Camden, where Speck, a military man with a bomb shelter, resided. Coincidentally, Speck happened to be Penny's ex-boyfriend, who still harbored feelings for her. Speck welcomed Dodge and Penny into his titanium-walled basement and allowed Penny to use a satellite phone to speak with her family. Following the conversation, Speck regretfully informed Dodge that there wasn't enough space for him in their shelter, only for Penny. Penny, though, had no intentions of staying. Instead, she requested the use of a car to take Dodge to Olivia. They set out together, but Speck instructed Penny to return with the vehicle later. They eventually reached Olivia's residence, but it appeared to be unoccupied. They decided to enter the house and make themselves comfortable. Later, as Dodge woke from a nap, he found Penny preparing dinner. They shared a tranquil moment by the fireplace, discussing everyday matters. As Penny spoke about her likes and interests, Dodge listened intently. Soon after, Penny discovered a letter from Olivia to her parents, complete with a return address. She showed it to Dodge and declared their plan to visit the address the following day. When Dodge and Penny reached the address, Dodge chose not to knock or check inside, even though he believed Olivia might be at home. Instead, he left her a letter, leaving Penny confused and inquisitive. She persisted in asking him about it, but he evaded her questions. Dodge was starting to realize that he had developed feelings for Penny, yet he hesitated to confess his emotions because he knew she needed to return to her family. During their conversation, Dodge turned his gaze towards Penny, almost colliding with some people. Following the crowd, they discovered that people were lining up at the beach for a collective baptism. As they observed this sight, their burgeoning love became undeniable, culminating in a kiss that spoke volumes without needing words. They lingered on the beach, joining others in spending the precious time they had left with their loved ones. Penny and Dodge eventually continued their journey, reaching Somerset. Dodge introduced Penny to Frank, the person he knew with a plane. It turned out that Frank was Dodge's father, whom he hadn't seen in over 2 decades. Unresolved family issues had created tension between them, but they chose to set aside their differences in light of the impending apocalypse. They spent a beautiful final evening together, attempting to make up for lost time. As Penny finally drifted to sleep, Dodge carried her to Frank's plane without uttering a farewell. But before departing, Dodge confessed to the sleeping Penny that she was the love of his life. Frank flew Penny back to England, while Dodge returned home to find a note from Karen, who was looking for him. Elsa was also in his apartment, cleaning. Angrily, Dodge told her to leave and be with her family. In a moment of frustration, Dodge took back his angry words when he saw the confusion in Elsa's eyes. She assured him that she would see him next week before departing, unaware that there wouldn't be a next week. As Dodge watched the final TV broadcast, the anchorman announced that the asteroid would arrive in precisely 16 hours. Realizing the end was imminent, Dodge descended to Penny's apartment to spend his last hours there. He listened to Penny's music records, then lay down on the floor, awaiting the world's end. Suddenly, the power went out, and Sorry, the dog, began to nudge Dodge, prompting him to get up. It was then that he saw Penny had returned for him, distressed that he had allowed her to leave. As they reunited, Penny revealed that she had persuaded Frank to turn around when she awoke. They lay down together, spending their final moments. Penny made Dodge promise not to let her fall asleep, and he agreed. She told him she simply wanted to be with him, a sentiment he fully reciprocated. To distract Penny from their impending fate, Dodge encouraged her to talk about her childhood as distant explosions echoed in the background. Penny grew fearful and cried, but Dodge remained calm, expressing his deep love for her. He cherished the time they had together, and as they locked eyes, the asteroid finally struck, bringing the world to its end.